Good morning. Are you awake? You should be. You got an extra hour of sleep. I didn't feel like I got an extra hour of sleep, but I apparently did, somehow or another. I'm so glad you're here this morning, and I just wanted to let you know that what I'm going to do is my message today is going to be focused around the very first one of our sort of reformatted mission vision statements, which is know Jesus. I want us to focus in on getting to know Jesus more. And all of you are here, so my guess is that you have heard of Jesus at least, or you wouldn't come to a church. But there's a lot more to knowing Jesus than just knowing about him. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that this morning. Specifically, I figured I would kind of use the story of my own life and my connection with Jesus and how I got to be from being what you guys would call a religious person to being someone who has released his life and into the control of Jesus, letting Jesus be the Lord and leader of my life, being in complete control of everything I do. And the reality is, that is my commitment to God, but the reality is I'm not always good at it. And my guess is that there's some of you here that are not always good at letting God have control of your life either. It's our common struggle. But I figured rather than be preachy or trying to be overly teachy, I would just use some stories to help you connect with what I believe God wants me to connect with. And what's interesting is for those of you who've never spoken up front like this, you really don't have a clue how much work goes into this. Cliff knows because he's getting ready for next week. Russell knows because he's done it a few times. But the reality is that there's a lot of work that goes into it, and most of all, what happens is this message or this topic is for me more than it is for you. I mean, at least up to this point. And now, hopefully I can impart a little bit of wisdom of what I believe God's been teaching me so that you can learn to do some things and get a little closer to knowing who Jesus is as well. Sound like a plan? Okay. Well, before we go into that plan, I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story that just went down this past week. What happened this week? What was the big day this week? Halloween. Now, whether you like Halloween or you don't like Halloween, we're not really going to talk about that. At my office, it's become this thing in the workspace where they encourage people to come in costume that day. So, you know, I'm not typically a big costume guy. Shelley is a big costume gal. But I decided to embrace the costume last year, and this year I decided to take it to a whole other level. My entire life, in the last 20 years, I have been told by many people that I look like a particular TV character and movie character. And so I thought, and I haven't necessarily been big on embracing it, but I thought this year, what if I tried to come in costume and see, can I really pull this off? Are you ready? You want to see what that looked like? Okay, take a look at this. Did I succeed? Can you imagine if I actually had professional makeup done? I think I could really take this yet to another level still. So yeah, I guess I'm Data. This is the life you didn't know about me. Before you ever met me, that was my role.
Different hairline though.
Why is Steve Savage calling me? My phone's here, and all of a sudden it comes up, Steve Savage is calling. And I'm like, did I say something wrong? Did I do something? Should I answer it? He's sitting right there. What's interesting is that actually is really good timing because it's going to fit into this sermon very nicely. Anyway, now that whole data adventure is over with, let me tell you a little bit about who I really am. See, some of you know me. Most of you have at least met me. there's a whole variety of different places where people are at in this room as far as how you know me. And the reality is that Shelley knows me better than anybody, but she's also had the opportunity to live with me through good and bad for the last 25 years. And so, we have gotten to know each other a little bit in that time. Some of you have been at LifeBridge for 10 to 15 years, so you've gotten to know me a little bit too. But today, and if you've been here long enough, you've heard me tell a little bit of this story, and I'm going to tell a little bit in a different way. I just want to give you a short version of how is it that I came to the place that I really met and got to know who Jesus was. It was one stormy February night, 32 years ago. I was just 20, and I was invited to a young adults conference. Now, I'd connected with a few young women and men who went to church, and I grew up going to church. I grew up going to church, but not really. I knew who Jesus was, but I didn't really know who Jesus was. I was very religious. My family was very religious. We went to church every single Sunday of my entire life. So I knew church. I knew that I had to have a good respect for Jesus and for God. I really didn't have any comprehension of who the Holy Spirit was. And I really didn't understand who Jesus was or who God the Father was. But this particular night, I was invited by some friends to a little tiny Baptist church here in Cole Harbour. Well, it wasn't really that tiny. It's Forest Hills Baptist Church. You may have driven by it. Or you may have driven by it and you may not have even noticed it. It's right next to the Petro-Canada station on Cole Harbour Road. And there was a guy speaking there that night, and he was reading from the book of Luke. And he was telling a story on this, and it was a stormy night. It was snowing, it was a mess outside, but there were about 150 to 200 young adults in the room. And when he started to speak, it felt like he was speaking only to me. I suddenly was so enthralled by what he was talking about, and I really believe it was God getting my attention because you know what it's like when you're in a situation like that, and I'm a little bit of a prankster and a jokester. If you had been here during sound check, you would have thought I was insane. But I talk a lot. And to say the very least, I talk a lot. And I was really talking a lot this morning because they couldn't get the sound quite right. But anyway, back to that stormy night. It was like that speaker was speaking only to me. And he was telling the story from Luke that Jesus told about the prodigal son. And the prodigal son had gone off and he had shamed his family. He had left his family behind. He had basically disowned his family. And he went off to live his own life of adventure. And he wasted away his entire inheritance through crazy living, just being a party dude. And he got to the point where he actually hit a really low place because he ran out of money, he ran out of friends, he didn't have a job, and he was basically working just shoveling stuff out of pig pens. He had hit the lowest point of his life, and he decided, I'm going to go back and beg my dad to let me come back and be a part of the family again. Not as a son, but just as a servant. Maybe I can live there. Maybe that will be better than what I'm experiencing now. And you know, what happened was, in that story, the prodigal son kind of shamefully walked his way back to his family home. And his father saw him coming off in a distance, and he didn't just see him coming and recognize him. He saw him, he recognized him, and he ran to him. He ran to him and he embraced him. He ran and he loved him, and the son couldn't even get a word in edgewise. He couldn't even ask if he could be taken back as a servant. The father immediately decided to put a robe of honor on him and decided to throw a party and reinstated him as his son. And in the story, the father figure in the story is the semblance of God the Father. And so as this speaker was telling this story and he was using different examples, it was like he was speaking directly into my soul. And I got a picture of who God is as a father, and I got a picture of how much he loved me and how much he would forgive me and how much he would show me what my real true identity is, just like he did for that rebellious prodigal son. And you see, you have to understand where I came from. Though I came from a religious home, and my house was a safe home, it was a good place, but I had really low self-esteem. I had really low self-worth. And I didn't really have a lot of friends. I didn't know my earthly dad real well, and until he died 2 years ago, I still, to this day, do not really know who he was as a person. I never got to know him. And so for me, the concept of a loving father, a father who would embrace me, a father who would kiss me, a father who would help me see my real identity, my purpose, my peace, and give me a safe place to be and be part of a family. I wanted to belong so badly. How about you? We all want to belong. We all want to have purpose. We all want to be loved. We all want to be cleaned up, have our messes thrown, away, and be in a safe place. And that's what God offered me. And it was and that moment, I was so skeptical. Even though I desperately wanted this, I was so skeptical that I actually challenged God. You can do that. He actually could take it. And I said that night, what was funny is the speaker invited people who wanted to give their life into the hands of God. He was inviting them forward. Now you might find this hard to believe, but I was a really, really shy young guy. I like to talk a lot, but only amongst friends. Doing something like this? Oh, no way, man. I was never going to get up and speak publicly. And I certainly wasn't going to go to the front of a church and have somebody pray for me. So I sat there in my chair, kind of like Ken sitting there with my arms crossed. And I said, okay, God, if this is really true, if this is really true, if you really are like that father in the story, prove it. Show me that you love me. Show me that you have a purpose for me. Show me that there is a plan for my life and that it's better than this mess that I was in. And even though I wasn't, you wouldn't have looked at me and said my life was messed up, but inside, my life was messed up. And you know what happened? No fireworks went off. My life didn't change immediately, but my perspective changed instantly. You know what? I actually went home that night, and people had been challenging me, well, read the Bible, read the Bible. And I'd try. Somebody even bought me a Bible. Read the Bible, they said. It's good advice. But if you don't know who Jesus is, it doesn't make any sense. So I was reading it, and I was struggling, and I was reading it like it was some other language. But that night, I went home, and I opened my Bible, and it was like, whew, it came alive. It's like, wow, I get this. And day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, here I am 32 years later. And I am a completely different guy today than I would be if I didn't have this relationship with a guy named Jesus that you can't see, but you can know because he gives your life purpose and peace. And I'm telling you, I have not had the easiest life either since I made that commitment. My life hasn't been bad, but most of you know I have been divorced since that time. I have lost a job and been let go and laid off. I have had my entire house burned down and lost every worldly possession that I owned. And you know how I got through those 3 major life-changing, turn upside-down events? Jesus. A peace that passes all understanding. And if you don't know who Jesus is, you don't know this peace. You cannot know it, and I cannot describe it to you, and I cannot help you feel it or understand it. You only know it as you get to know who Jesus is. So that's my story. Shall I stop? I got a few more pages here. That was the best decision I have ever made in my entire life. I have never once regretted it in 32 years. In fact, I have looked back on that moment and some of those 3 milestone markers that I just mentioned, going through a divorce, being let go from my career job, and losing my home. Those have been markers that God has put in my life to teach me things, but also to allow me to look back, not in pain, but to look back and think, God, if you could take me through that and give me peace, you can help me through anything. And I know there's other people here that that know Jesus, and you have experienced how he's carried you through some of the most difficult times life has to offer or bring your way. The best decision I ever made. So this summer, I sat down with Shelley beforehand and I said, I need to take 2 weeks off this summer, and I need to do nothing. I need to have 0 commitments. I need to go 0 places. I need to just sit in my chair and look at the sea, look at the ocean. I'm very fortunate. I have a very good view. But my life for the last 2 years, one of the reasons I haven't spoken much here at LifeBridge in the last 2 years is because I kind of let life take priority. I let certain priorities get out of control in my life. As many of you know, I own a business, so I'm a co-owner in a marketing agency, and it has been growing, and it's been growing rapidly in the last 5 years. The last 2 years in particular has been the best it's ever been. It's still not perfect, and it's still not quite where we want to get to, but we've experienced a lot of growth, and we've gone from a team of me to a team of 5 in the last 5 years. And that's exciting. And so it's working. And we've had an opportunity to work with a lot of neat clients. But I also am a partner in this floorball business that some of you guys have heard about, Premier Floorball. And it's been growing. Not making nearly as much money, but it's been growing. And then, as you well know, I was actively involved and integrally involved in this crazy thing we decided to take on, which was that World Floorball Championships. And that started to consume my life. So I had work at Be Responsive. I had work at Premier Floorball. I had the tournament that I was dealing with. I'm a leader here at LifeBridge. And I still have a wife that I'm supposed to spend some time with. And where does Jesus fit into that? And so I needed to do a recalibration this summer. I needed to sit down and figure a few things out, and for 2 weeks not have any commitments. And Shelley was very good about it. And she said, do what you need to do. Take the time you need. And so I did. And as I was kind of sitting there in that blue chair, looking out at the ocean, I kind of came up with what I believe was some insights from God, which I'm going to share with you this morning. I got thinking after day one of my biggest problems is this. Now you have to understand, I run a digital marketing agency. This is an integral part of my daily life, and it's an integral part of what I consult with my clients, that this device directs who their customers are and how they interact with them. But do you know that this device is constantly... Now, is there anybody here that does not have one of these? Oh, there's 3. That's unusual. So I'll speak to the rest of you. The 3 of you, there's other things coming for you in a minute. This device in your life is constantly dinging and ringing and pinging and flashing and buzzing. And you probably are like me. I'll just say what I am like, but maybe you can see some of yourself in it, is I'm a slave to this device. When it pings and when it rings, who did that? When it pings and when it rings, I respond. I have to look. And probably so do you. And sometimes when I'm in a group of people and I hear a phone ping, I immediately grab it because I think it must be mine, surely. So on this little vacation that I took for 2 weeks, on day 1, I felt like God was saying to me, turn off the phone. Turn off all the notifications on your phone. So I had committed already I was not going to check email for the whole 2 weeks. So I told my team, unless the business is being, investigated by CRA or by the RCMP, do not call me, do not email me, do not text me. I'm not responding. But then there's Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and YouTube and text messages and all these things that are constantly sending notifications my way. Can you relate? And I shut them all off. And I immediately went into withdrawal. Because this thing is always with me. What do I do when there's nothing, I'm missing out on the world, am I not? Or am I not? And you know what? For 2 weeks, I didn't get a single message. And it was great. It was awesome. The only thing I used this for in 2 weeks was to check the weather, because there was a hurricane coming. You might have heard of it. And I used it because I have a paper Bible, but I most often read the Bible on my phone, on an app. It's the only app that I opened for 2 weeks. And you know what? It was free. It was so free. Because you know what's wrong with our world today? As much as this is one of the coolest, most incredible devices, shutting it off was an opportunity to let my mind shut down. You know what my aunt, I have an aunt who's 92 years old. She's my godmother. And she said to me one time, I don't envy the life that you live in. Because when I was your age, we were tired physically because we worked hard. But you're tired mentally because you're constantly processing information all day from the moment you get up to the moment you go to bed. You're mentally exhausted. I was mentally exhausted. You're probably mentally exhausted because you don't know how to shut it off. You don't know how to turn off the noise. I didn't know how to do it. You probably don't know how to do it because these devices have taken over our lives. And they're good. I'm not saying it's not good. There's some good stuff there. But who's in control? And you know what? In those 2 weeks, I've got the opportunity to just be still. To just be quiet. Because the other problem in our lives is not just the devices, but it's television and movies and games and going to restaurants, going out with friends, going for coffee and going, I think, correct me if you think, you can talk to me afterwards if you think I'm completely out to lunch, but I think we are addicted to entertainment in North America. We can't sit still. We can't be quiet. We can't just be silent. If we're not doing something, something's wrong. And you know what? God didn't program us that way. Doesn't mean he didn't program us to work hard. Doesn't mean he didn't program us to be his representatives and to be in relationships and to be about doing business. But at a certain point, we can overdo it because we don't know how to shut down. Do you know that there's a commandment in the Bible that says, on the seventh day, rest. Take a Sabbath day. Take a day of rest. Do you do it? I started just this past year trying to make Saturdays my day of rest with no phones for one day. No phone, no email, and no commitments. It's really, really hard. It's really hard. Part of it was hard for me at the beginning because I run a business, I felt I always have to check my email. If I'm not checking the email, who's looking after the business? What a lie. It's Saturday. There's more to life than that. And you know what? Just even having one day has helped me. Having those 2 weeks where I had no commitments and no responsibilities and no processing information for 2 weeks helped me. You know how I know it helped me? Because there's a woman sitting over there and she can tell. She has pointed it out. Because in my times of being quiet, in my times of listening to God, in my times of shutting out the noise, I've been asking God to help me with some character flaws that I have, with some areas where I wrestle with sin. And you know what? I'm far from perfect. Ask her. She sees me every day. But what she does see, and she's told me without me asking, she said, I can see the difference in you. So that if the person who knows me best in this room says that she can see the difference that it makes, then it makes a difference. The person or the people that know you best will see the difference when you get to know Jesus. When you start to shut down some of the noise, when you start to prioritize some of the things that he's asking you to do, to just be quiet. And in this quiet, a passage of the Bible came to me. And this is one of my favorite passages in all the Bible. Not coincidence. I don't believe in coincidence. Not coincident that this was the passage that came to me while I was on vacation. It's Psalm 46. Psalm 46, one of my favorite verses in the whole Bible is 46:10, which says, "Be still and know that I am God." I'm going to give you some context about that in a second. But in this season of quiet, I just decided I would be still and I'd let God speak to me instead of me always doing the speaking. Because, you know, that's what we often do, right? We have lots of, if you're a praying person, you have no trouble asking God or telling God what you need, want, or think. But do you listen? I don't listen real well. In this whole chapter, it talks about God being in control. At the beginning of it, it says that God is our refuge and our strength. God is our refuge and our strength. Is he your refuge and strength? And then it goes on in the chapter to say, if he's your refuge and strength, then therefore we will not fear. We will not fear. Do you fear? What are you afraid of? We all fear some things. And a lot of it is we fear not being in control. So that's one of the biggest challenges with us and God, is letting him be in control instead of us being in control. Then in the chapter it goes on and says, God is with us. Can you imagine the creator of the universe? If you get to know him, he is with you. So if he's with you, what do you have to fear? If you're struggling with fear, and I do in different ways, and if you think about it, I'm sure you do in different ways, it's because you don't totally trust him. You don't totally believe that he is with you. And then in the chapter, he invites us to come and see what he has done. How often do you look around you to see what God has done in creation, in your life, in your family? And if you don't look, you'll never see it. God is there. You know what amazes me? This is a little bit of a rant off to the side. But every once in a while, I'll have a conversation with somebody, and I'll say, so how have you seen God working in your life? And it's crickets. I've stood in several times in LifeBridge over the years, I've stood and asked, how have you seen God working in your life recently? And sometimes people don't even know what to say. Are you telling me that you can't see God working in your life? You shouldn't have to think about it very hard if you really know him. And this is not me being prideful because I can see it. I have to work at it. I have to really work at it and say, God, where are you? And show me what you're doing in my life. Or show me, here's what I would like to do today, but you probably have another idea of what my day should be like. So since you're in control, here's what my plan is, but I'm not stuck on it. Do what you want to do. And you know what happens when I pray that prayer? Which I don't pray all the time, but the more I pray it, the more easily I get to see how God gives me opportunity to represent him in a way that I never would have planned for that day. It is a blast. Now, I will also say that I am a weak dude, not physically, but spiritually. Maybe I'm weak physically too. But there's many times God gives me an opportunity to represent him and I choose not to. I drop the ball. And then I feel bad because I know almost instantly. That was my opportunity to represent you, and I walked away from it. I have, in a few situations, turned around, mostly because it was a pushing and a compelling prodding from the Holy Spirit saying, you got to do that. And I know what that feels like now, and I know what that sounds like in my soul because I've avoided it enough times that when I feel it, there's a sensation. Again, it's something I cannot describe to you. I've never heard God speak to me audibly, but he speaks to my soul in promptings, in ways, I want you to do this. I want you to do this. I want you to do this. And when I do it, it's awesome. And when I don't do it, I realize it now. Oh, I missed it. Because I was selfish. Because I had my agenda. And I didn't let God have the day. And then at the end of this chapter is where, in chapter 46 of Psalms, it says that he says, God the Father says, Be still and know that I am God. Are you being still? Or are you like me, letting your priorities get all amok? And you know what? None of what I was doing was bad stuff, really. And this is a slide I told you I wasn't sure if I was going to use or not, but I'm going to use it now. There's a lot of good stuff that we can do. All the things I was doing, Be Responsive Media, Premier Floorball, the World Floorball Championships, doing things at LifeBridge, my life group, being a leader here, trying to be a friend to the pastor, trying to be a friend to some of you, trying to have my relationship with God, have a relationship with my wife, have a relationship with some of my friends. They're all good things. There's nothing bad about any of them. But I can't do all that stuff. So if you're feeling burnt out, I get it. I've been there. 10 years ago, I was really there. There's a few people in this room that know where I was 10 years ago. And I was so overrun with responsibilities and running around and doing all these good things. And it burnt me out. Physically and mentally burnt me out. And it took me 4 months of being completely shut down to recalibrate. And it was horrible. And I don't want to ever go to that place again. And I was feeling, now I know it, I was feeling in the summer like I was heading down that road again. And whose fault was it? It was my fault, and I knew better. I've been there. I knew what I felt like when I burnt out, and I didn't want to ever be there again. And all of a sudden, I'm standing there going, oh my goodness, what is going on with my life? With all these good things. You're doing good things, but are you doing the best things? Are you doing the right things? And the only way you'll know, the only way I could know, is if I sat down and was still. And I asked God, what of the things am I doing are the right things for you? Not for me, but for you. And in those 2 weeks, I got a lot of clarity. And you know what? When you are involved in as many things as I was, or I am, it's hard to lop something off. What am I going to give up? So then I wrestled, sitting in the blue chair, and I said, okay, God, what do I need to change? Because this is not sustainable anymore, and I'm not smart enough to decide what's most important. So you know what I started to realize God was showing me? Well, the most important thing is my relationship with Him. Priority number one. I know Jesus, and I know that my most important thing is my relationship with Him. And I have to make that a priority. And that doesn't mean that I have to block off this little box of time, and that's my only Jesus time. Now, I do block off a time. So every morning, I hate getting up early. I am not a morning person. For those of you who know me, you know I am not a morning person. That's why I drink coffee. But I get up at 6 a.m. every morning so that I'm ready to start the day at 6:30. I can't do anything without a shower either. So I get up and I go through my setup of the day, and at 6:30 I start my time of quiet. Now this has actually been a part of my life for a long time. 6:30 to 7:30 every morning is, I have a room in my house which is a sunroom. It's an octagonal room. For those of you who've been there, you know it. For those of you who haven't, picture being in a room that's got 8 sides, 7 of which are windows, looking out at the ocean, and that's what I call the praise and worship room. It's the room where I sit and I have my coffee. It's the room I sit and I have my breakfast. And it's the room I sit and I try to listen to God. More often than not, I do all the talking. And the other problem is this thing, this great device. So what I decided to do this summer is change the routine with the device, because my Bible's on the device. So when I sit down, the very first thing I do now is I open the Bible app. I do not open my email. I do not open social media. But I've been guilty of letting those be the apps that get opened first in the past. Oh, I'm only going to look for a minute. And then 10 minutes, 15, 20 minutes later, I'm still scrolling through Instagram, watching all of your lives. So the only thing that gets open for me is the Bible app first. And I may read for 2 minutes, I may read for 5, I may read for 15. I very seldom read longer than that. And what I've started to do is I try to read it, and then I ask, God, what is it about this that I'm supposed to know? Or how can I live like that? Or how can I be more like that? Or what do you need me to learn about this? And that becomes my conversation. Then I try to shut up. And if I'm anything like you, or you're anything like me, my brain often will want to start thinking about, oh, I have that meeting at 9 o'clock this morning, and I got it. Oh, I didn't get that done. And, oh, shoot, yeah. What was that verse again? And I'm constantly having to bring myself back because my brain skirts and scoots all over the place. I'm not great at it, but I'm getting better. And then I just try to listen. And eventually, somewhere between 7 and 7:30, I do open my email and I do open Instagram, but I try to keep it kind of calm to a smaller portion of the time. So that's my Jesus time, my praise and worship time. But that's not the only time. If I really know who God is, and if I'm really growing in my relationship with him, then what's really happening is that I'm representing him and I'm walking with him through the whole day. Now, a lot of times I will talk to God while I drive. So if you ever see me driving and it appears like I'm talking and there's nobody in the car, that's what's happening. I literally talk out loud. Because I have an hour drive, 57 minutes every day, each way. It really is, it's 57 minutes, repeatedly, unless there's some crazy traffic thing. And so I have time then. Sometimes I'm listening to music, sometimes I'm listening to a podcast, sometimes I'm listening to nothing. Sometimes I try really hard not to listen to the news. It makes me depressed, right? So I'm telling you these stories so that you can start thinking, what can you do in your life to get to know God more? What can you do to your day, to the rhythm of your life, to the cadence that you're living? You know, how does all this relate to you? That's really what it comes down to, right? And I think that I needed to make a shift in my priorities. You need to make a shift in yours too. I don't know your life. I don't know what your priorities are. I don't know what your rhythm is, but I know that I needed to shift my priorities. I'm trying to do some of that and put it back in order where God is first, where my wife, Shelley, is second, my job, Be Responsive Media, is third. Well, actually, no, it's not actually. I'm trying to prioritize that LifeBridge, my church, is third. I believe in what God's doing here. I feel that he is changing some things. I feel that we're on the brink of a lot of really cool things happening. And I want to be a part of it, and I don't want to miss it. And so as I was wrestling with God in those 2 weeks, that was the priority order. God first. Shelley second. LifeBridge third. Be Responsive Media is how I pay my bills, so it has to be fourth. You know what I concluded? As much as I love this floorball stuff, I have to stop. I can't do it. So you know what I did? I went to my business partners at Premier Floorball, and I shared this somewhat in a condensed way. And I said, guys, I believe in what you're doing. I love the sport. I love being a part of this business, but I can't do it anymore. I just can't. I don't have the bandwidth. I don't have the margin. I've tried and I've looked at everything from every single direction, and this is the only thing that I can stop. That didn't go over real well, to be honest, but they did understand because both business partners are also Christians. So we mapped out a 2-month exit plan. And on October the 28th, it was my last meeting for Premier Floorball. I'm still a partner, but now I'm a silent partner. I'm not involved in the day-to-day operations anymore. It had to be done. There was no other way. So what's your situation? What's your life? What do you need to change? And you're not going to make that decision right here, right now, but you know there's things you need to prioritize. You know you need to ask God, what do I need to have the priorities of my life look like? Your situation is very different. But it's not different in that you don't need to do some of this hard work too. And the only way you can do it is if you ask and then you be quiet. If you don't know who Jesus is, then your journey is, God, challenge him like I did 30 years ago. God, I don't know who you are. I don't know if this is real. I don't know if that crazy guy standing up there this morning is really speaking truth or not. Prove yourself to me. Show me that you're really there. That's my challenge to you. If you don't know who he is, it's the most important question you can ever get answered. Make a decision one way or the other. Either he is who he said he is or he is not. But you decide. And I promise you, when you go on that journey and you challenge him, you will have your eyes open wide and your life is going to take a spin in a good way. I challenge you. Don't be overcome by the entertainment. Don't let the entertainment of our culture make so much noise that you avoid the most important question in life. Who is Jesus? Get to know who he is, not just know that he existed. Most important thing. If you do know who Jesus is, and you are sitting here this morning or listening on video and you decided at some point in your life in the past, yeah, I'm going to release control of my life and let God be the leader of my life. I'm going to let Jesus be the Lord and leader of my life. Is he? Take some time and talk to him. Do whatever you need to do to cut some of the noise out of your life, whether it's for a day or for a week or for a couple days, and just whether you need to go for a walk in nature, whether you need to go to the ocean and spend some time on the beach, whether you need to get out of the house, whether you need to lock yourself in a closet, whether you need to build yourself a sunroom. I don't know what you need to do, but find a way to get away from the noise. Shut off the phone. Reprioritize some of what's going on in your life and let God tell you what it is you need to do. And it will be impressive. Because I'll tell you something, all these decisions I've been making the last couple months have actually been very peaceful. There's been some hard decisions, but it's been very peaceful. And I guess this is where you just need to decide whether you're going to take some action as well. I mean, the point of all of this is that we came here this morning. I've shared a couple stories of my life. I've given you some examples of what I've done. But in order to really know Jesus, you and I both need to be still. You need to be still. You need to carve out the time, and you need to make some changes. There's a guy named Martin Luther who was a very strong Christian leader many, many, many years ago. And he said that one word from God is better than 1,000 prayers, or better than 1,000 of our prayers. So stop talking and just listen. Be still and listen. Prayer is, that's all it really is, right? It's just talking to God. It doesn't need to be this holy thing where you get down on your knees. Sometimes you will, but you don't have to close your eyes and put your hands together in a particular way and bow your head and just talk. And you can't do that if you're too busy. And you can't hear if there's too much noise in your life. I heard somebody say recently that we are what we repeatedly do. We are what we repeatedly do. So what's the rhythm of your life that you're repeating over and over and over again, and is it good? Is it God's good? Or is it your being in control of your life instead of God being in control of your life? And if it's you in control of your life, then it's not as good as you think it is. And this same person said, change comes from forming new habits. Change comes from forming new habits. And his challenge was change a habit and just get 1% better every day. So don't look at it and go, oh, I need to change so much stuff. I can't possibly do it. One step. One baby step. 1%. Another step. Change a little bit. If you're not reading anything in the Bible, you'll never get to know who Jesus is. Read one verse every day. And then ask God to speak to you. One verse. One verse is better than no verses. Oh yeah, but it's not, I'm not learning enough, I'm not being deep enough, I'm not, I should be reading a chapter a day yeah, maybe. 1%. One step. And you know what is going to happen? You're not even going to see the change in your own life. It's going to be the people around you that see the change in your life when you take that 1% step every day. 1% every day. Be still and know that Jesus is God, that He is in control. He created you for a purpose, and He has a mission for your life, and it is going to be the best. But you can't live it out if you aren't plugged in, if you don't know what it is that He's asking you to do because you're not listening. So on your seats is this connection card. And Steve mentioned it at the beginning. The most important part of this card is the prayer box at the back, where you get to write down something that you want the leadership of this church and the team that is our prayer team to pray for. And you can write something that you want prayer for somebody else, but I would like you to use it today to write down something that you want to be prayed for this week. To live out, to make a change as a result of what we talked about, or what I've been talking about. You guys haven't been talking. What I've been talking about this morning. Even if it's one word, I challenge you to write it on here because I want to pray for you. Steve wants to pray for you. The other elders and leaders in this church want to pray for you. Our wives want to pray for you. And our prayer team wants to pray for you. And we cannot pray for you if we don't know what you're wanting to change. We cannot pray for you if we do not know what you're struggling with. So don't worry about someone else today. Worry about where you're at with knowing who Jesus is and living that out in your life. I want you to take a minute and write something on this card so that I can pray for you this week. And now what I want you to, and you can, let's just take 30 seconds and do that. And don't look at the person next to you. And, just write down something in the prayer request. If it's, you want help, you want God to give you greater understanding of what your priorities need to be. You need some time to figure out how to find time in your life where you can be still. You need some time to reprioritize what's going on in your job or in your family or your schedule or your kids' schedule or whatever it is. We all have something we need to change. And the only way the change is going to come is if we ask God for it. And now what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask that we all stand up. And there's probably someone within vicinity of you, and I want you to put your hand on their shoulder or their hand on your shoulder. There should be nobody standing in this church without somebody with a hand on their shoulder. So if you have to move, move. Oh, Shelley and Ken. What the church is community. The church is a community of people who believe that Jesus is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, that having Jesus in your life transforms your life and gives you a different purpose. So right now, I just want us to pray together that we're connected by touching each other and that the Holy Spirit is part of where we're at this morning. Jesus is present. God says, I am with you. He is here. Let's pray for the things that God has put on our minds, our hearts, and our souls this morning, that He would start to help us change that 1% every day into stepping closer into relationship with Him and getting to know Him more. Let's talk to Him for 1 second. Jesus, you are our King. You are the one who loves us more.